Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's live chat once again. Made sure that the mic's working. I hope you guys like the countdown. Pretty cool stuff, right? So everything seems to be working out just right. Getting better at this stuff, right? We have a lot to talk about tonight. We have some strong wins. Now, some people jumped the gun a little bit in terms of the wind gust potential here, and we'll talk about that in a moment. I got something in my eye. That was fun. We'll also talk about the development of our polar vortex, see where we're at with that, and of course the pattern evolution. And as always, taking all of your questions. All the questions first from the premium live chat, and we'll see what's floating around out there in social media land. Of course, we are live on YouTube, X, Twitch, Facebook, and of course at nynjpaweather.com. So let's take a look at what we have here. Okay, and there we go. We have a prefrontal trough approaching. We have a cold front. We have some showers here. A lot of these showers are showing some convective element because we're having a little bit of instability in the atmosphere. And that is what opens up our strong wind gust potential. So this prefrontal trough will move through with showers, and then between this trough and this cold front is where we're going to see our wind gusts really push the bounds of potential wind damage and power outages. But I don't think it'll get anywhere near like the 70 miles per hour that was being advertised yesterday. The reason why is because of instability in the atmosphere. We're going to break down all that using the skew T. But first, I just want to show you what type of environment we're dealing with. So at 850 millibars, we have pretty strong winds, right? And, I mean, not anything that is historic or anything of that nature, but still strong enough to produce some pretty strong wind gusts, ranging anywhere from, again, you could use the key down here or look at the isobars here, or should I say isothatch here, ranging anywhere from around 35 knots to as high as 55 knots. And so you have this air rapidly moving at the mid levels of the atmosphere. And so what you need is a process to mix that down. And there are several ways to do that. One is a convective element, where you have some convective showers and thunderstorms, and the other is where you have cold air advection coming in and creating mixing in the atmosphere. So we kind of have a little bit of both. Okay. And so when we take a look at the skew T here, you can see when we start off, I started off with the skew T at 7 o'clock, and you can see, ahead of this cold front here, not all that impressive. We have a stable environment at the surface, stable all the way up to around roughly 850 millibars, and then instability in the mid levels of the atmosphere. So you can see where that mixing, you can see where the strong winds are here at the mid levels, ranging anywhere, and let me zoom in here so you can see a little bit better, anywhere from about 50 to as high as almost 80 knots here, getting up to 90 knots, up to 550 millibars. So certainly some pretty strong winds at this level. So how do we mix it down to the surface, right? I mean, how does it get down there? Because right now it's kind of shielded off and cut off. Notice the winds here are much lighter, right? So let's move forward. And you can see ahead of the cold front, we still have a stable environment. And this point is at, let's see here, roughly 05Z. Okay, so we're getting to the point where we get towards, I'm sorry, 02Z. There we go. So we're getting to the point where we're getting closer to later at night. And notice as the prefrontal trough is moving through, look at this now. You can see this. Let me draw it on here. This, of course, it doesn't show up. Well, I had it working earlier, so what do you know? All right, so yeah, it has. Okay, so notice we're seeing this right here. Okay, we are having the atmosphere is becoming saturated here, and above the surface is becoming conditionally unstable, right? So in this environment here, it could take these winds and start mixing it down. When's that happening? As the showers are moving through later on this evening, right? So we're getting close to, this is roughly, I'd say 03Z, I'm still getting used to the clock changes here. So 06Z is 1 a.m. So we're talking about roughly 12, 11 to 10:30 to 11 p.m., right? So here we are approaching, here we are at 11 p.m. There's our instability in the atmosphere, still stable at the surface, not supportive of any thunderstorms, but you have your pressure gradient and you have the ability to start to mix down in the atmosphere until we get to roughly 1 a.m. and we start to lose that ability to mix down. We still have a lot of dry air here, so you're getting that moisture, whatever's left in the atmosphere, getting lifted up and then coming down to the surface, allowing for that mixing. Notice the winds are picking up here at the lower levels of the atmosphere now. And then we get to 2 a.m. There's that dry air again. There's our instability in the atmosphere. And notice the winds now at the surface are getting even stronger. Those 50-knot winds are getting close to the surface, but not completely at the surface. And that continues on until the 850 millibar winds start to subside and we lose our wind gust potential, right? And we start to lose our instability that was driving this whole process. So what you're basically watching here is mixing in the atmosphere and trying to get those winds down. Now, why didn't I buy the 70-mile-per-hour wind gusts that was showing up yesterday where we were having high wind advisories put out? And I even said publicly, I'm a little skeptical of this. The reason why is that this is happening late at night in fall. Now, if this was happening in the afternoon and even now, then game on. Full mixing. It's going to get a little crazy around here. But when you have this happening later in the evening, you tend not to get the full mixing potential set up here, unless you have really strong PVA, which we have moderate strong, but nothing that is impressive. So in this environment, what you have is strong sustained winds, 10 to 20 miles per hour, and your gusts ranging anywhere from 30 to 50 miles per hour. Nothing that is going to produce widespread damage, but some minor damage. And if you haven't brought in any of your Halloween decorations, or if you have a Tom the Turkey out there, well, the turkey's going to be flying down the road, okay, trying to run away from Thanksgiving dinner. So you don't want to have the turkey, the ghost, or anything else that is loose flying down the street, right? You want to bring that in and secure it. Same thing with your garbage pails or anything else. This is what I've been telling people, and this is why I would suggest doing so right now before those winds start to pick up. Now, most locations won't be that bad, but don't be surprised to get a few power outages. We already had one here in Freehold, but I don't think it's related to the winds. It's just Freehold being Freehold. But just so you know, don't be surprised if you wake up and you're surprised that your clock is bunking and you're waking up at the wrong time, which is why I have backups. Because there's a good chance we could see those power outages. And again, here are our current surface winds. Right now, we're ahead of the pre-front trough. Winds aren't too bad, ranging anywhere from about 5 to 15 miles per hour from the southwest. And when we scroll out here between this trough and this cold front, this is where we're going to have our winds. Look at them right now, sustained at 10 to 20 miles per hour. Gusts are pushing up to anywhere between 25 and 45 miles per hour. So those are some pretty good winds. I mean, let's take a look and see some of the observations here. Let's see here. Winds gusting 22 knots, gusts to 34 knots. That's pretty strong. That's getting up there. That's getting into your upper 30 and close to 40 mile per hour winds there. Same thing here in central Pennsylvania, Clearfield. Again, 24 knots, gusts to 42 knots. Not bad. So basically, once this trough moves through, and the reason why this trough and why we're focusing on this area, this trough instigates the instability and creates that shift where you're having dry air aloft, enhancing that instability. And then this is the cold front that comes through that pretty much puts an end to that process and dries out the whole atmosphere and basically kills that instability bubble. So between those two periods, that is where we're going to see our winds increase. And that's why we have wind advisories basically from 10 p.m. to about roughly 4 a.m. And that's what the forecast has been on the premium dashboard. Staying away from the extreme wind idea, you could see a 60-mile-per-hour wind gust, let's say, in the Hudson River Valley. And the reason why is because of we're seeing more of these showing up, and the forecast from the models, we go right here, suggest the 850 millibar jet will pump up a little bit more in the um, Hudson River Valley, right at the apex of mixing, and possibly around south central Pennsylvania. So you could see a rogue 50 or 60-mile-per-hour wind gust. Most locations would be somewhere between 30 and 45 miles per hour for a short period of time. And that is showing up as well on the latest HRR guidance. Now, the NAM is the one that really went out of its way of really enhancing these wind gusts because it went with a full mixing profile. But the HRR and the European and some other mesoscale models, but also the European synoptic model stayed away from that. And that was a clue to say, okay, maybe the NAM is NAMing. Okay, so we need to step back and really consider this. Can we have a full mix down in this environment? And I didn't think we could, and that's why we're seeing this back off right now. But again, it gives you a little bit of a leeway, so that way you got the wind gusts out there. You can roll it back if you need to. That's probably what they were thinking, and that's how they went about the forecast. As you can see here on the latest HRR guidance, this is for wind gusts. See, right around midnight, don't be surprised to get your wind gusts pushing anywhere between, let's see, on this is anywhere between 38 and one rogue 50-mile-per-hour wind gust around JFK. And then by the time you wake up tomorrow morning, it's nowhere near as bad. It's breezy. Definitely going to be breezy tomorrow morning. So you're going to want to have a good jacket with chilly temperatures. It's going to feel colder out there. But we're talking about generally wind gusts in between the 20 and 40 miles per hour. Might bump up to 42 or 45 for a short period of time. But that's generally what we'll be by the time you wake up tomorrow morning and get ready to hit the rush hour. So that is the near term evolution that we are seeing right now. And so that is what is heading for us at a pretty steady pace. And some of these showers are going to be capable of some heavier downpours. So that's certainly good. Maybe pick up a tenth of an inch of rain. So that is what is happening right now. But what about the future? Everyone's focused on the winter, but there's going to be some mischief in November. And the reason why I say that is because the pattern is evolving and taking shape. And when we look at the forcing mechanisms right now, La Nina is La Nina. Okay, what I mean by that is that the SOI is pushing it. Now, why is the SOI rising so much? What's happening? Our good friend the MJO. Hey, look what happens when the MJO is in a positive MJO phase for La Nina. It actually gets enhanced. But a lot of models are pushing that MJO into phase 7 and beyond if we get into December. Now, I typically don't want to rely on these long range forecasts here because the MJO can be really, really fickle. And if you try to lock in and say, oh, it's definitely going to go into phase 7 or 8, you're going to get some egg on your face this far out because the MJO can be really a real trickster sometimes. So you kind of want to go with a shorter forecast and then work your way through and then work your ideas based on what you're seeing in the short term on the evolution. And the trends here are basically heading towards more of your El Nino like states. Now, combine this with the fact that our IOD, which let me show you, here we are. Okay, like our IOD is severely negative. Let me pull that up here. There we go. Okay, take a look at this. This is when you see this signal, this is just screaming negative IOD. Now, what does that mean? Typically, when you have the temperatures lined up like this, you're going to build up a lot of convection around the Indian Ocean. You're going to support phases typically 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, that's typically, if you just leave this alone and this is the only forcing mechanism, you're typically around 2, 3, 4, and 5. But then when you start throwing in other mechanisms, then you start to either focus more towards 2 and 3 or 4 and 5. So, for example, if I was in an environment with a positive QBO, a strong polar vortex, and a growing La Nina, and then I had this, then I would expect a lot of periods of strong phase 4 and 5 MJOs. And if you want to go skiing, you're going to have to head off to the Rockies. However, if you have this and a negative QBO, a weakening polar vortex, and a very, very weak La Nina, barely, then you're going to push more towards phase 2 and 3. And with that, you start to weaken your La Nina even more. So the whole idea of your La Nina peaking in November, which shows up very nicely with our SOI values peaking in November and then crashing and burning, lines up perfectly with what's going on with the MJO. See, you see how everything's kind of connected? It's not like one thing where you just say, oh, I'm going to go with this, La Nina, La Nina, La Nina, build my whole forecast on it, and then go to bed. It ain't that easy. I wish it was. So you have to kind of combine things. And remember, stay away from hard rules, okay? When you're doing these forecasts, right? Or any type, when you're looking at the seasonal analysis or you're looking at everything, you cannot go A plus B always equals C. There's always a unknown factor. There's always chaos. There's always that coefficient of insanity. Okay, I think I want to coin that, right? Coefficient of insanity in terms of how these different features interact from year to year. And you start to get clues on how those things are interacting as you go through October and November. And you see how the models start to react in the long range. You don't take that as verbatim. You just say, what are the models trying to pick up here? What is the crystal ball trying to show? Well, it's not a crystal ball, but what it's trying to show is how all these factors are interacting with each other. So while you have all this playing out, I have been watching this. Oh, look, we like reds, especially if you like snow. You like red on this map quite a bit. Okay, because what we're seeing here is the evolution of the stratosphere. Now, when we have a low solar activity, which I know some of you guys are going to bring up, that could also enhance the stratosphere, right? Because then you can build up your ozone in this environment. Because I know someone's going to bring up 2009 and 10 or 2010 and 11. It's not the same environment, so you can't use those years. Okay, I know a lot of people like to use years as comparisons. This is why you can't do it, because no year is the same. But um, in this scenario, the sun's still a little bit too active. So you have to remove that. So what else is happening here? Well, we know our QBO is easterly and moderately so. So that friction coefficient, that enhancement, allows for more building of these pockets of warm air. Now, we saw it all during the summer, created a sustained negative EPO. And because it's the summer, it just kind of fed back on itself, right? And it allowed for water temperatures to really build up in the northern Pacific, right? So now they've cooled down a bit because we had this breakdown, right? So we didn't have a trough sustained over the Aleutian Islands and a ridge building on the Gulf of Alaska. And so what you had instead was a trough in the Gulf of Alaska. So you saw some cooling. A lot of people think of this as a lead in to the rest of the winter, right? And to change the winter forecast. No, that is a response to the evolution of the pattern. Okay, so sometimes you have to take a step back again, stay away from hard rules, look at what is happening in the atmosphere as it's evolving. And what's happening in the atmosphere as it's evolving is you're seeing the stratosphere warming and building these blocks. And what we're going to be looking for, if we're going to get a major stratospheric warming, is for this whole thing to go red. Now, could that happen? Well, we know that our snowpack has been built up pretty nicely and starting to expand in Canada. We know that we have a state in the environment, in the stratosphere to support it. And we know we're starting to get some high latitude blocking. Well, let's take a look at the mild guidance. Well, isn't this interesting? This is the measure of our stratospheric winds at 10 millibars. Okay, so it's way up there in the atmosphere. This is a stratosphere. This is a polar vortex in the stratosphere. We know already, and we'll take a look at some of the guidance, that we're seeing a persistent negative NAO pattern, which is supported by the sea surface temperatures, which lead to a feedback pattern, which is building everything. We know that the Pacific is kind of changing, but it's moving in such a way that with the negative IOD, it should support a nice, robust upper level low around the Hudson Bay. So, again, putting pieces together, you got your negative NAO signal, you got your support for more likely the polar vortex, especially in the troposphere, to shift towards the Hudson Bay. And now you see this. And this has been persistent for roughly 7 to 10 days now. Okay, I've been watching this, and it's done pretty well with this shot right here. Right, the model guidance 10 days ago was suggesting, hey, we're going to get a stronger polar vortex, and that's exactly what happened. Now, look where we're heading. At the very least, as we go through November and head into December, a weaker polar vortex. Now, I don't expect the polar vortex to remain weak the entire winter. Only very historic winters do that. And I stay away from that idea because it leads to a lot of disappointment. So let's just assume that we see a drop and then we see a rebound. Okay, we'll assume that for now, and then we'll see where the observations take us before we start getting ahead of ourselves for late December and January. At the very least, we have the observations and we have the model guidance, constant model guidance to suggest, hey, the pattern's going to be evolving to support more high latitude blocking, a weaker polar vortex, and an outside shot. I'll give you an outside shot that maybe major stratospheric warming event for early December. And if that happens, then, well, we're going to have some fun. But again, don't get ahead of yourself just yet. Right now, most of the guidance, which is still perfectly fine, would suggest, again, this is the average, this is the lower bounds, this is the upper bounds. If this was all up here, we'd all be saying, okay, well, see you next year for winter forecasting. If it was all down here, we would be saying, get your snowblower out and get ready for November. But it is somewhere right below this line here, which tells us that, yeah, this polar vortex is going to be very weak. Perhaps not a full reversal, perhaps not a major stratospheric warming event, but it's going to keep us on our toes. So we're definitely moving into that type of environment. In terms of the long range data, negative EPO trend is going negative. The NAO trend negative and then neutral. This wavering is actually good news for you snowplow guys. You don't want a strongly negative NAO. Okay, now this is why. Strongly negative NAO means suppression. It means that your storm track gets forced to the south and all the snow ends up in North Carolina, which would kind of comical considering my parents moved down there to get away from the snow. But this signal tells me wavering. And most of our winter storms occur when the NAO is wavering from negative to positive and positive to negative, kind of like a wave. So we're seeing this signal showing up here. What don't I like? PNA. Looks like more slight negative. Now, there could be a variety of reasons why we're seeing this with a positive TNH pattern where you're going to kind of get this big trough cutting into the Rockies and then swinging through the plains and heading towards us. You can kind of mute the PNA signal, right? So we have to watch to see how this evolves. But this typically tells me, okay, maybe not major storms in December, but a lot of minor to moderate events, like your clipper, fast moving type system, an inch here, 3 inches there, a dusting here, that type of stuff. Typically, if you're looking for a big storm, you want to see this go positive, right? So, again, we have some time to watch this. But overall, this is not a huge big storm signal, but certainly an active signal and certainly a cold signal. So, certainly something that's going to keep us on our toes. And in terms of the model guidance, in the at least over the next 10 days, again, you're seeing the polar vortex getting disrupted here, and you're seeing the stratospheric warming gaining support. So a lot of evolution starting to take shape here. A lot of signals are coming up here. And again, I don't want to get too far ahead in terms of the 500 millibar pattern. Okay, so here's the 46-day European ensembles. And what I would take from this is that, okay, I'm seeing a lot of signals where you kind of have a little weak trough here, weak ridge here, trough out here. Okay, you probably end up with a ridge around the west coast, broad trough, a lot of clipper-like systems, a signal of a weak block here. You end up with slightly below normal temperatures, and somewhat active but not widespread heavy precipitation. So it'll keep us on our toes. But again, this is not a major winter storm pattern as we look at it right now. And then as we look at a little bit closer to home, what do we have here? There is our block showing up again, just repeated. Unlike last year where we tried to get negative NAO and it kept on getting knocked down because we're in a positive QBO state, this is all just constantly repeating itself. And again, there's our signal here, what we're talking about with the IOD influence. It's going to return. Okay. And then here is our La Nina influence with our MJO combination. So this all makes sense. This all plays out and makes sense. Now look what the ensembles do as we move forward. You end up, and I'll go up to 300 hours. Why does this stand out to me? Okay, I got a negative NAO pattern here. I got confluence here, so I got a strong high pressure system probably somewhere around here. I have your very weak suppressed southeast ridge. Gee, does this look familiar? Yeah, it does. It's very, very close. It's slightly displaced to the west. Positive TNH pattern. You take this trough, you push it more towards Oklahoma and Texas. You start building this ridge up. You start seeing this trough drop south. This ridge remains in place, and away you go for late November. Again, I've been saying, and premium members know, while I don't have any data to support a major storm for Thanksgiving, that time period will be favorable for activity. Okay, could be before, could be after, could be during, I don't know. But that time period, if you roll this forward, take this trough, push it east towards the plains, take this ridge, push it more towards the Bahamas. You have your negative NAO block sustained. This digs south, and away you go. So a lot of interesting stuff evolving here, taking shape here with our weather pattern. And in the meantime, while we're dealing with that, we're going to have these progressive cold fronts marching their way through. Sunday looks to be a bit unsettled, some showers. Monday is going to be chilly. It's going to start out reasonable and chilly. Tuesday, we could see some snow flurries down here in the coastal plain. No accumulation, but we could actually see that. And mostly driven off of the lake effect snow and with the strong pressure gradient here. Sometimes you get some stronger winds. You could get a a snow shower dropping through Trenton and into Monmouth County or dropping through Philadelphia or Northwest New Jersey. Don't be surprised on Tuesday you see that, okay, with this strong cold air transport. And temperatures are going to be in the 30s and 40s, which, again, no accumulation, but certainly let you know winter is on the way. So, by the way, if you haven't shut down your water outside, I would suggest doing so by the time you get done with this weekend. Don't want frozen pipes. So, yep, that's on the to-do list, that's for sure. So again, no major storms over the next 15 days, though. I don't see anything like that. Very progressive pattern, waves of cold and warm air. We'll get surges between Pacific and polar air masses, but no like major huge storm is on the horizon at this time. A little bit beyond this point, maybe we might have to keep an eye on some things. But right now, looks pretty straightforward. So with that, that is my spiel for tonight. Now let's see what questions you have. And of course, we'll start out with the live chat room. And one of the things that, what I'm going to set up, I think next week, is to take the live chat room and put it right up here. Actually, you know what? Heck, well, I just try doing that right now. Make it easier. So that way we can all see. Why not, right? And for you guys who don't know, okay, so I'm going to do this here and premium dashboard. If you guys ever wanted to see what the premium dashboard looks like as it loads, okay, see, look at all this information here, tons and tons of information, all coming out of my brain, which is crazy, right? All right, just a one-man band doing his thing, and let's see what questions do we have for tonight. And again, thank you for all the premium members. You guys are awesome as always. I figure it's easier for me to do this rather than me repeating all the questions. I'm just going to answer them straight out. I'm going to zoom in here so that way you can see them. About Alan asks, yesterday or Monday you mentioned how La Nina will collapse. The question is so soon. Could you explain a 500 millibar pattern in either of these scenarios, December, January, and February? Okay. So what's going to happen with this La Nina collapsing is that you're going to see the ridge in the Bahamas and around southern Florida basically becoming less and less of a factor. Okay. And you're going to see an increase in the subtropical jet stream shortwaves. A lot more moisture to work with, but still all the other factors in place. You're still going to have a cold neutral environment. We're going to have to watch out in February to see if we actually move towards a warm neutral environment with a potential developing El Nino. But let's just go with the cold neutral idea first and just go with the idea that, hey, in this environment, you're going to end up with a storm track potential with more moisture to work with, less suppression, less of a southeast ridge influence, and a higher potential for more interaction between the polar and subtropical jet stream. Any thunderstorms with the cold front? Not really, not much. We might get some thunder showers. You might hear a rumble, but the primary threat here will be the strong winds. With some snow showers on Tuesday. Any thoughts? Yep, just cover that. I would say these snow showers generally around the Poconos and Catskills. Don't be surprised if we get some bursts of snow and picking up a dusting, especially your higher elevations, about 2,000 feet. But everyone else just flurries. Watching soccer matches taking place in Europe over the weekend, and this week's lots of them had lots of rain. For any implication for a wet pattern in November in UK and Western Europe has for us? Not a lot. It's certainly a sign that the negative NAO idea is influencing both sides of the Atlantic. Um, for us, we need the negative NAO signal and the Pacific signal to line up. So when we get that negative EPO signal really start to line up, I think we get wetter again. So that's what we're going to have to watch out for in combination. And it's 61 Queens. EPS Box and Whiskers plot has a mean high of 43 for Tuesday. That would probably set a record. Maybe it will come close in a few locations. Also, a 70 millibar Earth Move school showing some warming in the Hudson Bay area as well as the Northern Pacific. Yeah, I mean, things are definitely starting to evolve in that. When do you think Morris County, New Jersey, we see its first snowflakes of the season? I would not be surprised if we see our first flurries, okay, on Tuesday. Um, but real actual snowfall, where like you could actually have to shovel and move, I'd hold that off until mid-December. I don't like to go into early December just because unless I get a lot of observational data to support it, because of the state of the sea surface temperatures. Would not surprise me if the usual snowy spots in the Poconos get a bit on Tuesday if we're going to possibly get flakes in the area. Yeah, I agree 100%. So there is our live chat room. We'll come back to that in a bit. In the meantime, I'll keep the radar up. Let's see what's going on in YouTube land. Yeah, let's see here. Let's see what we got here. Uh, well, there's definitely as we head towards the winter, there's going to be a potential. I don't have any detailed data as far as whether or not we're going to have what type of storms or when or how in terms of January, February. But as you read in the winter forecast, which I know you did, uh, Robin, that there's going to be some potential for some activity. I don't have any actual data to go over, and that's way too far out. I wouldn't say snow squalls though, Christian. I don't see any snow squalls out there, um, unless you head up towards the Great Lakes. I think if you had to head up, I think the closest it'd be like the Finger Lakes in New York for snow squalls. Let's see anything on X. Oh, we got stuff on X too. Uh, I don't see any. I wouldn't be surprised you get some dusting on like cold tops, like top of a car, top of bushes, but nothing that you have to like shovel or plow or anything of that nature. Nothing like that. Let's see here. Haven't seen anything on X, but I do have some stuff here on Twitch. Yep, you definitely have to do some winterizing for the farm. Good luck, dude. Uh, and good evening, everyone. Let's see anything on our favorite platform. As always, Facebook. See, Facebook is weird. They try like they set it up, and I've had trouble doing this myself, finding the feed that keep on hiding it. It's like, what are you doing? That makes sense. Let's see. In the meantime, you can see the cold fronts approaching. Here comes the showers. Let me see if I can pull up some more data here. This. All right. Now we have the showers here. Let's see what we could do with the winds. Trying to see if we can get some data here that's just too sparse. Okay. So unfortunately, let's see here. Certainly, well, we're certainly seeing some increase in the winds, but nothing that is really impressive. And showers. Again, I don't see any thunderstorms per se, but some of this line here, don't be surprised if it comes with a couple of wind gusts with it as it moves through. Probably drop about maybe a tenth of an inch of rain out of this. Not exactly a huge amount. Not exactly. Let's see here. YouTube is definitely picking up. It's a little too early to go into El Nino just yet for next year. There is some very, very preliminary support for it, but we got a while to go, especially with the subsurface. Um, in theory, you would think that eventually you would move towards the El Nino. Don't know how strong or anything of that nature, but that's the theory. Yeah, I mean, definitely the models are definitely trending more and more towards a weak polar vortex. That is certainly true. Okay. Um, Look, I don't want to jinx myself here, but literally every observation I've looked at is a match to the winter forecast. So all you premium members that have read the detailed analysis, including what can go wrong and what can go right, you see what I'm seeing here. Okay, you're seeing the whole pattern evolution. Now, understand this, that this does not mean that every storm that develops is going to give you the snowfall you want. Um, but what it tells me is that I'm going to be pretty busy. Okay, which is why I'm going to need more coffee. The showers are definitely pretty impressive marching away. Curious to see what happens in Allentown in terms of the observations here when we get that wind shift line. And let's see here. Let's see what the observations here are. Hazelton here. Let's see. Wind shift, very heavy rain. Can't believe they're calling it VFR though. But all right. Seeing that gust automatically pushing to 27 knots, so about 30 miles per hour. Very heavy rainfall. And behind that wind shift line, gusts. We're seeing a lot of gusts in the 35 to 40 mile per hour range. That's pretty impressive. So it's going to, once this, again, this is the line here that's going to kickstart our winds. The cold front's trying to catch up to it. So this is why I wasn't looking for this to be a prolonged event. Certainly a pretty good scenario here. Let's see if we have any more questions here. Go. Do you expect coastal flooding and erosion to be a problem this winter? That's a good question. I think that the type of erosion set up like a Miller A storm probably isn't going to be seen a lot. If we get a lot of Miller B storms with that northeasterly wind constantly developing, um, I could definitely see an increase in coastal flooding. That's easy. Okay. All right. We're seeing that more and more. As far as major beach erosion, it's a possibility, but I don't think it's going to be as high as what we saw in years past, because we're not looking at a mature nor'easter marching up the coast, right? Where it's starting to form in the Gulf, and by the time it gets to us, it's a 900 millibar low with really powerful northeasterly winds and sustained northeasterly winds for a 6 hour period out ahead of it. But instead, we're going to see low pressure systems starting to develop and then mature once they get into New England. So that typically reduces the beach erosion threat because we're at a point where the low is developing and rapidly intensifying, but hasn't reached that mature stage yet. Let's see. I have no idea as far as, see. Here's the thing, okay, and I know that there are going to be people out there that will really, really focus on trying to nail winter storms out, and that does drive viewership, absolutely. And by the way, if you like to help this channel, please like, share, and subscribe, whatever platform you like, right? Whether it's X, YouTube, Twitch, whatever you might be following, share, spread the word, right? because it actually helps and kind of counteracts some of the hype out there, right? That we all know. Here's the thing: you'll never catch me making declarations of major winter storms several weeks out, or the most powerful winter storm or anything of that nature, because all that does is just a disappoint you, b mislead you, and c just give me a lot of heartburn because I can't, because I want to be right all the time. So if I start making declarations like that, I'm going to drive myself insane. So I do not do that. Huh? Exactly. um I would say that as far as the weather pattern, again, definitely read the winter forecast, because one of the things I made mention of is that in terms of the storm tracks, we're going to see a lot more. We're going to see very few, if any, Miller A storms, mostly Miller B storms, a lot of clippers, stuff like that. But I don't have anything as far as storm development guarantees or anything of that nature. We're definitely moving towards a stormier pattern as we head towards early December. But I don't have any details beyond that, and neither does anyone else. And by the way, I already saw some people already using the CFS model. The CFS model is a climate model, okay? Climate models are good for broad-based idea of the weather pattern. Even that can be a little bit iffy sometimes. You never, ever use it for looking for storm tracks or potential storms. It's not a synoptic model. That's not what it's used for. It doesn't have the resolution to handle all the different 500 millibar PVA, positive vorticity advection, um, issues that would go into forecasting for a storm. So you never, ever, ever are supposed to use it. I'm already seeing people floating around here trying to use it. It's a really, really bad idea. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right, Susan. It's not what it's made for. Our most historic storms are typically Miller A's, but you can get a historic Miller B. It's just a matter of blocking and how fast the storm moves. Let's see here. Go back here. See what else we have. Yep, Susan, you're feeling better? Yeah. Hey, she's upright. So there we go. Yep, she's feeling much better. But thank you for asking. What do you anticipate for lake effect snow next week? Oh, uh, and I'm having flashbacks to college. Someone's going to be getting. I would not be surprised if someone gets over 6 inches out there on Monday night into Tuesday. It looks like it's some pretty good bands too. I mean, when we take a look just at the preliminary model data here for this setup here, there's our low lifting up, and these are what I'm interested in is that there's a nice connection here with Lake Huron here, so pretty good. Don't be surprised to get some pretty good snowfall off of Lake Erie with this connection. This is just classic connection. Probably around Indiana as well. Those two guys around Ohio have a good shot. The Lake Ontario, if you get this fetch just right, it might miss Rochester, but don't be surprised. Like the Tug Hill, get some pretty good snowfall out of this. Good old Tug Hill. Oswego could get some pretty good snowfall out of this. Um, so it's certainly going to be an interesting time. First shot, and man, I've had memories up here where like I'm getting ready to head home for Thanksgiving, and I'm snowed in Oswego because like we can't get out. I was on a bus down to get down to the Port Authority, and my dad had to pick me up, and I was like telling him like, "Hey, I don't know if I'm going to get out of here." And the band shifted north just long enough for it shifted towards the Tug Hill, and in Oswego, we were able to get out behind a plow truck plowing us to the interstate in order for us to get to where we needed to be. So that was the one time I'm like, man, I really don't want it to snow. because I wanted to get home and have turkey. So that was a hell of an experience. The Euro AI, well, it's not really okay. It's not. So the European model and the European AI model are not that far off in terms of evolution. The question really is about the 500 millibar interaction. The AI model, again, I do not use that for forecasting yet. This is the first year it's being used, right? So what does that mean? We don't know what the error is. This is the same thing as the European. Um, I wasn't impressed with the tropical analysis with it, so it's not all that good. And quite frankly, I wasn't impressed with any. There was a lot of hype about AI models and the tropical forecasting, but what the hype was is that they found they had a group of different model solutions, and they just focused on the ones that were 100% right after the fact, which I thought was hilarious. But it's also just complete waste of time. Once again, AI models, you have to, the problem with AI models is that you have to have error first so it can correct itself. So it's kind of like being the person to buy the iPhone for the first time. You get to test it out. You get the honor of paying more money than what it's worth to test out all the bugs and then be the feedback mechanism for them to fix all the bugs to make the second iPhone, which is cheaper, that everyone else could buy without any of the bugs. That's what the AI model guidance is right now. Yeah, it's a flashy new toy and everyone gets excited because it's AI, but you don't know what the error analysis is. Okay, you don't know what the bias is. You get to find that out yourself, right? Operationally, there's a lot of um, theory that goes into it, and there's a lot of testing that goes into it, which is great. But it's the operational model weather people like myself who actually get to see what it does in real time with real observations. And thus far, I'm not all that impressed with the AI guidance. Now, on the European guidance, yeah, there's a nice interior storm for Canada. All right, and you can make case that you get this low set up maybe down here towards the Finger Lakes, and then you can make a case for Western New York. Um, so that's certainly a possibility. I wouldn't rule it out, especially 5 days out. Absolutely, it's a possibility. Um, but I think that either way, we're going to be dealing with some pretty good lake effect snow out of it. Let's see here. I see there's some shenanigans out there as always. Let's see if we have any more questions out here. I think we do. I'm just waiting for it to update here. There we go. Okay. AI models programs are just like any other model with same type of issues, data quality, and problem logic. Yeah, the AI model guidance is all about statistics, right? It takes the current observations. It isn't based on physics, right? So that's my first warning sign right there. Um, but what you could use the AI model for is if you know you have missing data and it extrapolates that, not the first run, but possibly the second or third run, you can start to get a better idea of what's happening with that missing data and what actually might be possible rather than waiting until the next sweep. Let's see here. Pretty good amount of viewers here on X as well, on Twitch as well, and X, and very good questions, guys. Absolutely. It's going to be a real fun challenge to work all these different models. And here's what I fear that's going to happen. That's going to be a theme this winter. It's called model paralysis. People are going to be looking at so many different models saying so many different things, you're going to know very quickly who has a plan of how the atmosphere will work and who is jumping from model to model. Okay. A plan gives you a reason why you think a storm's evolving the way it is, how it's going to evolve, and what to look for changes in the atmosphere. So, for example, we're forecasting a nor'easter. We're expecting heavy snow. We're looking for the track of the 700 millibar low because then that will tell me where the heaviest snowfall will set. If it sets up a little bit south of Cape May, then the I-95 corridor gets very heavy snow. If it sets up a little bit further east, then the immediate coast gets heavy snow. Now, what I just did, without mentioning one model, was give you a breakdown of the storm structure, how it's going to evolve, and what are the uncertainties that we're going to be watching for. Someone who's just jumping from model to model will say, well, here's the GFS solution, here's the European solution, here is our graph AI in-house model is doing. They don't give you a forecast. They just show you all the different model solutions, which, yeah, anyone could do that. But which one's right and why? So that's what you should ask. And that's going to be the difference between understanding the forecast and just jumping from model to model, right? So, for example, if the only time you should drastically change a forecast based on a model run is if you can literally see the observations and you see what was missing and you have a light bulb like, oh, I missed this shortwave or I missed this dry air. Something that says, hey, I missed this and now I see it, and now I see why that model's doing that. So I got to change the forecast. Again, it still comes back to not I have to change because model X says so, but I have to change because here are the observations, here's the evolution, and this is what model is handling that evolution the best. And that's why we're going with that. You're able to explain the changes that are going on, not just Model A, Model B, Model C. Yes. And observations are always king. Always. Always. Let's see here. Yeah, I mean, the European weeklies are certainly interesting. That is for sure. Yes. Has there been, well, if the QBO is very weak, and let's say you have a very weak QBO, right? It's like barely is very close to neutral, right? It's in a state of change, but you have a very, very strong El Nino or La Nina. That tropical forcing overwhelms any type of QBO influence. So again, it just kind of depends each year to year. What are your drivers and what are your enhancements? Pouring rain in Lehigh River Valley. That's true, Steve. Absolutely. Let's see. Anything else on X? Let's see where our radar is. Oh boy, here comes our rain. Let's see if we got an update. It's pretty good. Pretty good shot coming in. Very nice. So as we approach the 9 o'clock hour, and I gotta get my sleep because I gotta get up early tomorrow morning. So here's where we're at right now. Short term, cold front coming through. Winds are going to be picking up around midnight. As you're falling asleep, don't be surprised if you haven't secured that witch that you had left out for Halloween or the turkey you just put out for Thanksgiving. If you haven't secured that, that might be flying down your neighbor's yard. So just be aware of that. I probably wouldn't put the garbage out tonight either if you have. Um, this will move through about a tenth of an inch of rain, very heavy rain, burst, boom, out, and then the winds come in. And the winds will continue between here and here. So again, we're not talking about all night event. By the time you wake up tomorrow morning, It'll be breezy, but it won't be dangerous. Okay. And then as far as the pattern overall, we have a series of cold fronts that are coming through. We're going to get our cold shot. Coldest shot is going to be on Tuesday morning, but even Friday morning is going to be pretty chilly out there. So progressive transient cold shots coming through, patterns evolving, moving in the right direction. I like what I'm seeing. Um, your strongest winds, really from about 10 p.m., an hour from now, as this is approaching, right? From 10 p.m. to 4 a.m., that's when you're going to see your strongest winds. So we're approaching that in about an hour from now. You're going to start to see the winds really start to pick up. You'll get that shot of rain. What's that? Yeah, you get that shot of rain, and then that rain, after that rain, you'll get the windy conditions, maybe one more shower, and then it's done. And then by the time you wake up at 6 a.m., 5 a.m., what have you, you'll be all set. And the morning rush hour shouldn't be that bad. Breezy, but nothing that would support any type of damage or anything like that. So that's it for tonight. When we had a hell of a live chat, that is awesome. And we don't even have any major winter storms yet. So thank you, as always, for all of your questions. I really, really appreciate it. Please help get the word out about how awesome this stream is. If you have friends who do Twitch, get them to join the channel. YouTube, X, Facebook, what have you. It actually helps out quite a bit. And our goal this winter is to spread the word to counteract some of the, let's say, less reliable individuals out there. Creative types, or some of the major corporations out there that try to make believe that there are tropical storms that aren't. Not give names, but I'm just saying, if you want to get rid of that stuff, you gotta promote people that actually give you the truth and back it up. Thank you as always, and as always, stay safe out there.